zaślu da słońce geza. Oj,
And so it's a pleasure to introduce our speaker, Professor Jeffrey Sachs. He is widely recognized for bold and effective strategies to address complex challenges, including the escape from extreme poverty, the global battle against human-induced climate change, international debt and financial crises, national economic reforms, and the control of pandemic and epidemic diseases. And he's authored and edited numerous books on those topics. Professor Sachs serves as the director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University, and he is also president of the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network. And so Professor Sachs has been an excellent resource on the war in Ukraine and US policy towards Russia, Ukraine, and NATO. And so we're very grateful to have him here with us today to speak on the pathway to a negotiated peace in Ukraine. So I'll hand it off to you now, Professor Sachs, to take it away.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all you do and for the wonderful words opening our session today. Can I be very brief so that we can have a discussion? Because I'd like to hear what's on people's minds and also questions. I'm following events, I'd say hour by hour, and trying to understand what's happening in a complex situation where we're not told the truth on most things. So you have to figure out what's going on because no one's going to tell you, and maybe last of all, the New York Times. So it's a real problem to understand this crisis. Let me basically say at the start that we're on an extraordinarily dangerous path of escalation between Russia and the United States. And the war in Ukraine is largely, in my opinion, a proxy war. It's Ukrainians fighting and dying. It's American weapon systems, intelligence, so-called officials, strategists, tactical finance that is backing this war. So this is, to all effects and purposes, a war between the US and Russia, though fought in a proxy way so far. Our goal, we're told from the US side, is to defeat Russia and force it to leave Ukraine after what is described as an unprovoked invasion on February 24th. I think there were lots of provocations, so the situation's more complicated, but let me just start with the desired outcome. I don't understand it. I don't understand how it could conceivably be achieved. We think that weapon systems and sanctions and fighting will wear down Putin or get him overthrown, and something will change and Russia will go home because they realize that this is not worth it for them. And maybe the US model, and by US, I don't mean us, the American people, we have no part in any of this. The model of those who are prosecuting the US side of this is that it's like Afghanistan or Vietnam was for the United States, that after it gets sufficiently bloody and useless, you just go home. I think there's a huge difference, which is that from Putin's perspective, but I think it's more general than that. It's not just one person. From the perspective of the Russian political actors and elites, the situation in Ukraine is not like America in Vietnam or America in Afghanistan. It's exactly in the neighborhood. And so it's viewed in Russia, I think, I'm not sure, but I think in much, much starker terms, that we will not lose this war because this is a war about Russian security. That's the Russian view. Okay, you could say they're crazy, not crazy, but I think that's the Russian view. And if that's the Russian view, and our view is we're going to defeat Russia, and Russia's view is we're not going to be defeated, I don't understand what anybody really has in mind other than continued escalation. And it is shocking, but not surprising, that every day now we have stories, will he or won't he use nuclear weapons? As if this is just another casual story in some newspaper column, as opposed to the existential threat to our survival, which it is. So I believe we don't have a plan. I don't think we have a strategy. We want to defeat Russia, and yet Russia doesn't want to be defeated. And even if we could, which I have my doubts about, defeat Russia on conventional weapons basis, Russia has 1,600 active nuclear warheads and 6,000 warheads in total. So I don't understand what our idea is. And again, when I speak of our, it's not mine, it's not yours, I think. It's our government's. And I don't even know who's really responsible for this, but it's a very narrow group and it has almost nothing to do with the American people, and no one's been asked about it, and no one's been informed about it, and no one's been told about it. And yet here we are near the brink of nuclear war. And we are near the brink of nuclear war. That's true. So to my mind, we are in a wildly wrong-headed approach. Oh, how did we get here? Again, this is much contested. There are two very different narratives. One narrative is Putin is, has delusions of grandeur and thinks he's Peter the Great and he's going to recreate the Russian Empire. That's the American story we're told all the time. I have a very different view, which is that we got here because the United States just can't keep its goddamn nose out of anyone's backyard. And we kept pushing NATO enlargement. And I was there 32 years ago as advisor to Gorbachev, and then advisor to Yeltsin, and advisor to Kuchma, first president of independent Ukraine. And I was an advisor to Yatsenyuk just after the 2014 events. So I've watched this pretty close up for 32 years. And I think the US is the provocation. This does not play well in the US media. In fact, it doesn't play at all. I can't get an op-ed published in the US media. They're not interested. They don't want to have any debate at all. So I think it is absolutely true, by the way, that the US and Germany told Gorbachev in 1990. Gorbachev offered, by the way, to disband the Warsaw Pact. That came from Gorbachev. We said, if you disband the Warsaw Pact, we will not use the occasion to move NATO to the east. And that became a condition, actually, for German reunification. And it was absolutely explicit. Now, since our government lies about everything, the narrative is, oh, we never promised, which is not true. And there's a whole vast documentary record of the US promising no enlargement. Well, of course, as soon as the Soviet Union went away, we thought it was a juicy opportunity to enlarge NATO, and started with Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, 1999, and then George W. Bush Jr. added 7 more countries, 3 in the Baltics, so 3 right on Russia's border, Bulgaria and Romania, which is Russia's Black Sea region, and Slovakia and Slovenia. And we continue NATO expansion. And in 2008, Bush said, now we'll go to Ukraine and to Georgia. And to my mind, this was just absolutely the most provocative thing we could do, because now we're pushing NATO right up against Russia's core security concerns. And the Europeans, many European leaders told me in 2008 how dangerous this was and how much they were against it, but the US calls the shots. So, ladies and gentlemen, to my mind, we've been stirring the pot the whole time. And there are many complications to this story, so I could talk for hours about the details. But in 2014, the pro-Russian president was overthrown. The US narrative is it was a mass public upheaval against a corrupt president. And I was there on the ground soon afterwards, and I know that the US played a direct role in the overthrow. And the Russians call it a coup. So we have competing narratives, but the Russians say, look, you overthrew the president friendly to our country. We don't want you anywhere close to our borders. At the end of 2021, Putin put forward security demands to the White House. At the core of them was, don't expand NATO. I called the White House at the end of 2021 to beg them, negotiate. We shouldn't be expanding NATO anyway, negotiate. And I was told, no, we have an open door policy, which means that anyone that wants to join NATO can join NATO. And I said, that's crazy. This isn't a right, this is a threat to another country. This isn't about rights, this is about the effects on the neighbors. And I said, do you believe that Mexico has the right to have a military alliance with China? I don't think so. But that's what you say about Ukraine, that they have the right to have a military alliance with the United States. I said, in any event, they can ask, but it's not prudent for us to do it. Well, the White House refused any negotiations. And then there are competing stories, and I won't go into all the details, but Putin invaded on February 24th, and we've been escalating ever since. And the last week has been filled with news stories, these casual stories of will he or won't he use nuclear weapons, as if, we're trying to predict the outcome of the Super Bowl. It's bizarre to me. I've just never seen anything so reckless. And I have no confidence in the US government, no confidence in what we're doing to head this off, because they're dead set on doing whatever it takes. That's what they say all the time, whatever it takes to win this, for Ukraine to win this war. And since I don't think Russia's going to lose this war, short of nuclear war, to my mind, we're on a recipe of continued escalation. And I'll stop with the reading. I want to read you one set of words from my favorite speech of modern times by an American president, which is President John F. Kennedy's speech on June 10, 1963. And just to give background about this, I wrote a book about this speech because I love it so much. After the Cuban Missile Crisis, Kennedy and Khrushchev knew the world's insane. We can't go on this way. We're going to blow everything up. We need to find a way to peace. And Kennedy gave this speech on June 10, 1963, to convince Americans that it was possible to make peace with the Soviet Union, which was not a conventional view. How can you make peace with the commies? And Kennedy said, we have to check our own attitudes. They're human beings. They have the same desires as we do, and they want to live in peace also. And so if the agreement is mutually satisfactory, it can be mutually observed. Very, very wise words by President Kennedy. And the whole speech is completely wonderful. And I've driven my family crazy for years by making them listen to it on multiple occasions, especially when I was writing the book. They had to listen to it 10 times at least. But in any event, Kennedy said something that I really, really want to emphasize. He said, and it's the most important statement for this moment, he said, above all, while defending our own vital interests, nuclear powers must avert those confrontations which bring an adversary to a choice of either a humiliating retreat or a nuclear war. To adopt that kind of course in the nuclear age would be evidence only of the bankruptcy of our policy or of a collective death wish for the world. So what Kennedy is saying is, you never, with a nuclear adversary, make them choose between a humiliating defeat and a nuclear war. But that's exactly what we're proposing to do right now with Putin. Not only that, every day Zelensky tries to humiliate Putin, not tries to solve a problem, but to humiliate Putin. Maybe, of course, he's rallying his supporters, but we get closer and closer to the precipice. I can't stand listening to Zelensky, I'm telling you, because maybe I can understand, although I don't really understand. If I were next door to Russia, I'd have a different language, because I wouldn't want to be nuked either. But what he's doing in terms of provocation is extremely dangerous, and we're playing the game because we're saying whatever they do, that's all right. They have to win. I believe that they're the ones shelling the nuclear power plant. I'm absolutely almost sure that it's Ukraine shelling the power plant. Our papers say we don't know who's doing it, but since Russia controls the plant and Ukraine wants to win it back, I think Ukraine is shelling the nuclear power plant. I think, by the way, just to add to the discussion, that we are the ones that blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. I'm pretty sure that was a US action. When I said it on television a couple of days ago, they cut me up. They took me off the air immediately because you're not allowed to say this on US television. But it's pretty much conventional wisdom in other parts of the world, even by reporters that don't write it in their paper. If you talk to them privately, they say, of course it's the US. Who else would do it? Who else could do it? Who else had an incentive to do it? So let me stop there. It's so dangerous. We have no debate in this country, in Congress or any place else. They're not asking us to be part of this discussion, even though it's our lives on the line and our children's lives and our grandchildren's lives. New York City is extraordinarily vulnerable, I don't have to mention. And our congressmen aren't saying boo. So one thing I'd love for us to do is reach the New York delegation to just say, this is reckless. Stop it. We're in the 60th anniversary of the Cuban Missile Crisis this month. We don't want to replay it. And we would never have survived it had it not been for Kennedy in that position, because if it had been any of his advisors, the world would have been destroyed. But he was smart enough not to destroy the world. So let me stop there and turn it over and open for discussion. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, Professor Sachs. Yeah, we have a lot of really thoughtful and important questions in the chat, and some that were submitted prior to the event. So let me just see here. I think there are a lot of folks who are skeptical or curious as to how realistic it would be for the US to negotiate with Putin, depending on what people's opinions about Putin and Russia's aims. But so what?
Let me just say one thing about that. We don't know whether negotiations would work or not. It's true. I personally believe they would, because I know a lot of the Russian leaders over a long period, and I believe that there is absolutely a way to negotiate, and that the central question is NATO enlargement, and that's the question the US has never accepted even discussing. But let me say the following. Suppose we negotiated something and that it was satisfactory, but then Russia violated it, which is possible. Then we would be in no worse situation than we are right now, but we would at least have the whole world know that we went the extra mile to try to find peace and the other side violated it. And that, to my mind, is the right approach. The right approach is to try for peace. And if it fails, you end up in war. But if you say there's no one to negotiate with, then you're surely in war. So I want to try the exit ramp, not guaranteeing, because nothing in life is a guarantee, not guaranteeing it would work, but believing that it would. I have lots of reasons to believe that it would. Russia is not a sole actor by itself. China is a very important actor in this. China actually would like a peace agreement. China would like to insist on a peace agreement. India would like a peace agreement. They don't want a peace agreement in which NATO enlarges because the US is targeting China too. But they want a peace agreement that is satisfactory. And so there are many ways to enforce a peace agreement beyond just a piece of paper. There are many interests at stake. And by the way, the Russians honor agreements at times. We do too sometimes. We break them a lot also. The Ukrainians broke agreements. They absolutely would not implement the Minsk agreements. So the Russians say, look, how can we negotiate? You lie to us, you cheat. Britain, France and Germany were supposed to be the guarantors of the Minsk II agreement. When the Ukrainians say, we don't like this agreement, then France and Germany remain silent because they're on the Western side. So there is a lot of deceit, but it's not just Putin. And our division of the world into the pure good and the pure evil is phony, and it's phony here as well. So my view is, and I can tell you, all over the world, people basically agree with what I'm saying, which is, yeah, this is a war about NATO enlargement. And if it isn't, we should prove that. We should say, okay, we won't enlarge NATO. Now let's see if you stop the war. If you don't, then it exposes this isn't about NATO enlargement. This is about your empire building. Then you get the whole world on side. But right now, the whole world isn't on side. I'm not on side, but a lot of the rest of the world's not on side because they believe this is a proxy war between the US and Russia.
So in terms of a negotiated settlement and what is really possible, NATO enlargement would sort of have to be the key piece of that.
I think it's the center. There are three issues that were mentioned every time. And remember something really interesting, another one of these mysteries. In mid-March, there was a flurry of statements by Russia, Ukraine, and Turkey, which was mediator, that the two sides had come close to an agreement and that they actually exchanged papers. And I spoke with a very, very senior Russian official about this who described this to me. And actually, the Ukrainians put forward the idea of neutrality. This immediately went to Putin. Putin said, let's draft a peace agreement around this. The Russians did. They put it back to Zelensky, and then Zelensky said, no, that's not what I meant. And the strong rumors, which I believe, are that the United States and UK said to Zelensky, hell no, you want us to back you? We're not backing neutrality. And that this was a complete change, and it was the end of the negotiations. So I think the US has been completely uninterested in the negotiations. That week, Biden flew to a NATO meeting in Brussels and declared this is going to be a long war. And then he went from Brussels to Warsaw and said that man can't stay in power. And then a few days later, Lloyd Austin said our goal is to weaken Russia. So I think it's US policy not to have a negotiated solution. I think there was close to a negotiated outcome beforehand. And I watch lots of Russian blogs, and they call for negotiations, which is, if it were Russia's desire not to negotiate, you wouldn't have the Russian bloggers calling for negotiations. I think Russia's idea was, we can scare Ukraine into neutrality, if I could put it that way. That was the original idea of the invasion. And I think it was a desperate move, but I think the motivating factor of the move was that the US was heavily arming Ukraine and threatening Russian security, and Russia could not get US attention. This is the basic point. We treat Russia like shit, if you'll excuse me, which is they put forward negotiating demands and we say, no interest. Why should we talk to you? You're a fourth-rate power. You're delusional. We're the superpower. And that, I think, is the basic point. Then we say there's no one to negotiate with after we say we're not negotiating. But if you don't know if there's someone to negotiate with till you negotiate with them. And frankly, we didn't even try. So, and if we tried and failed, we'd have the whole world on our side immediately.
So you had mentioned that members of Congress haven't made a strong call for diplomatic solutions. And there was a letter in Congress led by Representative Jayapal calling on the Biden administration to make a stronger diplomatic effort toward ending the war. And so why do you think progressive or liberal members of Congress were hesitant to sign that letter? And what can we as grassroots advocates do to push them in that direction?
Thank you for letting me know about that. I wasn't even aware of Congresswoman Jayapal's letter, so I'm happy that someone has done it. And again, I'm in Europe these weeks, so I may not know all that's happening in the U.S. debate, but I don't hear a word from officialdom of the contrary. And I think partly people who aren't looking too closely easily can accept the official narrative that, you know, that Putin invaded unprovoked and the guy's a madman and we have to defend freedom. It's a good story. It actually has elements of truth to it, but not very many. And it's hugely misleading, but it is an acceptable story. And I think for most Congress people, it's a kind of the default story. I don't think they know. But what is amazing to me is they don't even discuss anything. So I talk to a lot of officials, they don't know the history. Even senior officials in the US government don't know the background and they don't care. And so in Congress, it's much worse. But I do think we could do something, actually. I really do think that if we had an online gathering with the New York delegation, because this is urgent, and said, all of you, come on, let's have a discussion together. This is nuclear war, after all. You can spare an hour. And we actually had a discussion with the New York delegation. I bet it would make a difference. I think they just don't know, frankly. There's a lot to tease apart in this. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of, and the newspapers are so unbelievably without analytical edge that it's easy to get completely pulled into this. It is kind of the mainstream story. And so I think that this could make a difference, actually. I really do. I gotta hope that it could.
Yeah, thank you. And so I guess a follow-up to that is in advocating for our members of Congress to take steps toward a diplomatic solution, do you think peace activists should demand that the US get out of NATO or take a position of stopping NATO enlargement because the US is using NATO for hegemony?
I think that the peace community should call for negotiations now that can defuse this crisis before nuclear war. I think that that is the absolute most important thing to do. People are scared and should be scared. And by the way, every day when I read someone say, we're not going to be intimidated by this, I say, what the hell do you know? We're all going to be incinerated if you get this wrong. And I know, because I've studied it for 50 years, how close we have come to nuclear war. And given that we are on the 60th anniversary of the Cuban Missile Crisis, somebody ought to think a little bit more clearly about this. Maybe our key people in office, or some of them are too young to remember this, or they haven't studied it, they don't understand it, they don't know how dangerous this is. But I think that the focus should be stop this escalation. We are on the precipice. This is crazy. And there is a way to negotiate an outcome. And the two sides were negotiating in March. Send them back to the negotiating table, but with US support for negotiations. That, to my mind, is the key.
Great, thank you. And I'm just keeping an eye on the time and wondering if we're nearing the end of our time with you, or.
Yeah, I'm sure that I'm late for something, but let's take a couple questions and then we'll finish up.
Sure. So a lot of our members were interested in understanding the effects of the war on climate change and food security. And so I wonder if you could speak to that.
Oh, we have to stop.
Generally.
6 o'clock Pastor, 6:30 Tulsi, and then we're off to.
Okay, I'm finishing.
Yeah, it has to finish by 6.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I have to finish shortly. My wife is telling me, and she's the boss. So, sorry. About the effects of all of this on climate change and
food security.
And food security. Everything is bad about this crisis. There is no silver lining, period, because you cannot address any big challenge in an organized way in the midst of war. And so the immediate effects of all of this, as you know, have been economic destabilization, soaring fertilizer prices, soaring food prices, soaring energy prices, and that's a part of what's happening. But I'd say even a larger part is there's no international cooperative processes on development or climate or anything else as our geopolitical situation darkens. We're hardly speaking to the Chinese. We are, of course, at war with Russia, and institutions like the G20, which are supposed to be working on global challenges like climate change, are dysfunctional right now because they include the two sides to this conflict. And there are many, many countries in deep hunger crisis right now that get no attention. I know it because they appeal to me in my United Nations context role. I met world leaders at the UN General Assembly a couple of weeks ago, some in absolutely desperate condition. And I spoke to a very senior UN official yesterday who's trying to help on the hunger side, but he can't even get access to senior policymakers right now, even though he's representing Secretary-General, because our institutions are not paying attention to any of these things. They're paying attention to the war and to the election.
Great, thank you for that.
Maybe we should stop at this point, but just to say, if you could see a way to getting some of our delegation online, or you'd like me to help with that, but I'd ask you to take the lead, but use my name and so forth. I think this would be a great next step, and really necessary and a core democratic step, because our congressmen and women owe it to us to talk with us about this. This is dire, and we need to have a conversation. So you could count on me to join in on that.
That's great. Thank you so much. I feel pretty sure we'll take you up on that.
Wonderful.
Thank you for joining us and for being
Yeah, thanks to everybody. Sorry we didn't have time for all the questions, and I know people had further thoughts and some skepticism on some of it and so forth. It's just a very confused, very difficult, but extraordinarily dangerous situation. So I thank you. The voice of peace is the most important message right now, period. And we absolutely need to pull back from the precipice that we're deliberately climbing towards right now. So thank you very much, and hope that we're together soon.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Sachs.
Bye-bye.
All right, so I think now I'm passing it to, we're going to wrap up with some key action steps, but first I'm going to pass it to one of Brooklyn for Peace's co-vice chairs, Veronica.
All right, can everybody hear me? Thank you. My name is Veronica Nunn, and I serve as one of the vice chairs on the board of Brooklyn for Peace. And this was a very, very powerful, so thank you so much, Professor Sachs, for joining us for this. All of you who attended and those who will be looking at this later, because we'll be sending a link out where you can view this. I tell this story a lot, and I'm sure people are probably tired of hearing it. But in my earlier years, I've never been a politically active person in terms of protesting, signing petitions, or anything like that, And perhaps it's probably because, I grew up in segregated South, where it was really dangerous to even have a voice. You could be, you could actually be killed for that. And so basically, most of my life, I didn't really feel anything mattered as far as the power of the people. And listening to this, you can kind of start feeling like, oh, wow, what's going to happen? But anyway, a few years ago, many years ago, I was invited by a friend to a peace fair held by Brooklyn for Peace. And it was held at the Brooklyn Ethical Society. And, it wasn't anything of what I expected. I mean, what I saw was really different, In addition to they had art and painting and poetry and music and food, they also had these things like mini forums and discussions on like international issues, on Israel, Palestine, Latin America, Africa, nuclear disarmament. And all of these multi-issues were built around the importance and the need for peace and how to take action. And it was all in one place. Okay. So that was an epiphany for me, because I saw that this is what the peace movement is, or at least what it could be like. I mean, I could focus on one issue if I wanted to, but there were also all these other issues that I could learn about and take action on. And it was all in one place under one umbrella. So I was hooked. And so here was this organization that reflected how I felt and how I wanted to get involved. And I did get involved. And I'm going to be here as far as I can into the future. And, as long as I've been a part of Brooklyn for Peace, there's been many, many, many changes. And that's good, because to me, change cradles the feeling of hope. Professor Sachs talked about hope. Without hope, why do we do anything? We're here today because we want to learn, we want to stimulate, we want to find out what we can do. But we're doing it because we have hope that something can change. And right now, Brooklyn for Peace is in a place where it's really vital that we change the way we build our organization and moving into the future, where we can still be here going forward. And change is going to happen no matter what, but it's the choice we make around the changes that's the key. And when I joined this organization, it was all volunteers. And now we have a new executive director, Michaela, who is an incredible young woman. I love working with her, and she's, very informed in the youth, which I find very fascinating. But anyway, it brings me to this point. we need to have an organization like Brooklyn for Peace that is multi-issue, that deals with war and its effects. We need to continue to raise money, especially now. And also, I've been made aware that this is also an election year, so I know that some of you will be donating to your candidates, and that's great. But if you take a little bit of piece of that you're going to donate to them, maybe a little bit, and add it to the Brooklyn for Peace, that would really be great. So we're hoping, and what we want is that you support our sustaining the future of Brooklyn for Peace by donating. So we put a link in the chat here. And I want to thank all of you for joining us and being a part of this event. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Veronica. And now I think I'm going to pass it to one of our other co-vice chairs, Bruce, to wrap us up with actions and close us out.
Okay. Thank you, Michaela. And thanks to Professor Sachs and to everybody who came and participated. I think many people were asking, well, what can I do now? What actions can I take? And I want to suggest some things that you can do. First, take a look in the chat. There are a number of people from interesting organizations who did post some things they're doing, and you might want to be involved. Second, we're urging people to your representatives, particularly those of you in Brooklyn, to our Brooklyn representatives who, although they're usually pretty vigorous on peace, they haven't been very good on these, on the Ukraine issue. So please contact President Biden, contact your representative, and ask them to support a ceasefire and negotiated peace. Second thing you can do is Brooklyn for Peace is having a vigil every Saturday morning at Grand Army Plaza from 10:30 to 12:30. You don't have to sign up or anything, but we're distributing flyers and other information. If you'd like to, please come and join us this Saturday morning and pretty much any Saturday morning, at least as long as the weather holds up, in Grand Army Plaza between 10:30 and 12:30. We'd be delighted to have you. We're also going to be having a number of forums in the coming weeks. We have Daniel Ellsberg next Thursday at what's probably a more convenient time for people at 7 o'clock in the evening. And in addition, in 2 weeks, on the 20th of October, we're going to have a discussion of the Sachs and Ellsberg talks. These are also going to be being recorded, so you can get them, I believe, on our YouTube channel. And I hope you'll sign up for both the Ellsberg talk and our October 20th discussion of these two talks. Finally, this programming is important for, I think, the community, as evidenced by the large number of people who attended. We have a program committee that is planning next year's programs. We hope at least a few people from here can join us on that program committee. Contact either Michaela or Brooklyn for Peace. Our next program committee meeting is going to be on the 27th of October in the evening. And if you're available and would like to join, please sign up. And finally, one more finally, as Veronica said, to hold these events, we need your support. One way you can do that is for those of you who have not joined Brooklyn for Peace, please come to our website and sign up as a member. We have a small membership fee, but even if you can't afford it, you can pay whatever you can afford, either more than our fee or less as appropriate. So we hope you'll sign up. Again, thanks to everybody for coming. We hope we'll see you next week at 7 o'clock on the 13th to hear Daniel Ellsberg talk. Thanks again.